Stop scrolling right now because what you are about to read is the most emotional turning point in this fictional C-drama story universe, and if you click away too soon, you will miss the moment that changed everything between trust, love, and second chances. Stay until the very end because this is not just an apology scene, it is a deeply emotional transformation between Tan Songyun and Soo Kai where silence breaks, emotions collide, and two hearts finally confront everything they have been avoiding. It all began after a long stretch of emotional distance that neither of them openly addressed. The kind of distance that does not come from a single argument, but from small misunderstandings that slowly build up over time until even simple conversations start to feel different. On set, everything still looked normal from the outside. Scenes were filmed, scripts were followed, and professional interactions continued as expected. But anyone paying close attention could feel something had shifted beneath the surface. Tan Songyun had become quieter in moments where she used to be expressive. Her laughter during breaks was less frequent, her focus more inward, and her emotional energy seemed carefully contained rather than freely shared. Soo Kai noticed it, but did not immediately act. Not because he did not care, but because he was trying to understand the weight of what he was seeing. And sometimes understanding takes longer than expected. The tension reached its peak during a demanding filming sequence that required multiple emotional takes back-to-back. The atmosphere on set was already heavy due to exhaustion and timing pressure. And in that fragile state, even small misunderstandings felt amplified. A moment of miscommunication reportedly led to emotional distance becoming more visible between them. Not in a loud confrontation, but in silence that followed afterward. The kind of silence that feels louder than words. After that day, interactions between them became noticeably restrained. Eye contact lasted shorter. Conversations were more professional, and emotional warmth that once defined their connection felt temporarily paused. Even crew members could sense the difference. It was not hostility. It was emotional uncertainty. Then came the night everything changed. After filming had ended and most of the production team had left, Soo Kai remained behind on set. The lights were dimmed. Equipment was being packed. And the environment had shifted into a quiet stillness that often brings reflection. Tan Songyun was preparing to leave when she noticed he had not gone. Something about that moment made her pause. No one had planned a conversation. No script required them to stay. But something unspoken pulled them into the same space. Soo Kai finally approached her. There was no performance in his expression. No rehearsed tone. Only sincerity. He began to speak slowly, acknowledging the emotional distance that had formed between them. He admitted that misunderstandings and silence had contributed to the tension, and he expressed regret for not addressing things sooner. His voice remained steady, but carried emotional weight that was impossible to ignore. Tan Songyun listened without interruption. Her expression remained calm, but deeply attentive, as if she had been waiting for this moment longer than she admitted. When he finished speaking, there was a long silence. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with everything that had not been said before. Then Tan Songyun finally responded. Her voice was soft but clear. She admitted that the distance between them had affected her more than she showed. Not because of one single moment, but because of how silence slowly replaced communication. She explained that trust does not break suddenly. It fades when emotions are left unspoken for too long, and that realization carried more weight than anything else in that moment. The air between them shifted, not instantly repaired, but finally honest. Soo Kai listened carefully as she continued, and what she said next became the emotional core of everything that followed. She accepted his apology, not as an ending, but as a beginning of understanding. However, she also made something very clear. Her emotional boundaries had changed. She said she never wanted to reach a point again where silence replaces clarity, and that she could not allow herself to be emotionally hurt in the same way twice. It was not spoken with anger, but with calm emotional maturity. A promise to herself more than a warning to him. Soo Kai nodded without hesitation, showing he understood the weight behind her words. There was no resistance, no argument, only acceptance and reflection. In that quiet moment, something important changed between them. Not everything was fixed instantly, but something fragile was rebuilt. Understanding. In the days that followed, the atmosphere on set slowly began to shift. Scenes between them felt more natural again. Emotional performances became smoother. And the tension that once lingered started to dissolve into quiet professionalism mixed with renewed respect. Crew members noticed the difference immediately. The energy on set felt lighter. Interactions felt more stable. And the emotional flow between them returned in a grounded way. Not as perfect harmony, but as something more real. Something that had been tested and repaired. As filming continued, there were no dramatic announcements. No public statements. No exaggerated emotional gestures. Just two people continuing their work with a clearer understanding of each other. What remained between them was not a flawless story, but a human one, built on misunderstanding, honesty, emotional reflection, and the decision to move forward with awareness instead of silence. And in the end, that is what made this moment so powerful in this fictional narrative. Because forgiveness was not just spoken, it was understood. And boundaries were not seen as distance, but as protection for something still worth preserving. And that is why fans continue to talk about this moment. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt real in the way only emotional storytelling can. A reminder that even after silence and misunderstanding, two people can still choose clarity over confusion and begin again with more honesty than before. After the emotional apology and the quiet acceptance of boundaries between Tan Songyun and Soo Kai, the atmosphere on set slowly began to change in a way that was noticeable even without words. Tan Songyun continued filming her scenes with steady professionalism, but there was a new sense of calm in her presence. The emotional weight that had surrounded her in previous days seemed lighter, as if the act of finally speaking her truth had lifted something she had been carrying internally for too long. At the same time, Soo Kai appeared more reflective than before. He remained focused on work, but those around him noticed a subtle shift in how he interacted during breaks and rehearsals. There was less hesitation, more awareness, and a quiet respect for the emotional boundary that had been clearly expressed. The dynamic between them did not return to what it once was immediately. Instead, it evolved into something more careful and mature. Conversations were still professional, but there was no longer the invisible tension that had previously lingered in silence. Days passed like this, with both of them gradually adjusting to a new emotional balance. Then came a moment that surprised even the crew. During a late-night filming session, a scene required both characters to perform a deeply emotional exchange. It was one of the most intense parts of the script, demanding vulnerability and trust between the actors. As filming began, something unexpected happened. The performance between them flowed naturally again. Not because the past was erased, but because it had been acknowledged. Every line carried weight, but not tension. Every expression felt grounded, but not forced. It was as if the emotional honesty they had shared off camera had quietly translated into their performance on screen. The director reportedly did not call for multiple retakes. Instead, the scene wrapped smoothly, with an atmosphere on set that felt unusually still afterward. No one spoke immediately after the take ended, not because something went wrong, but because everyone could feel something had shifted into place. In the following days, their interactions became even more stable. There were no attempts to revisit past misunderstandings, no forced emotional conversations, and no visible discomfort between them. Instead, what formed was a quiet professional understanding built on clarity rather than assumption. The boundary Tan Songyun had expressed was not treated as distance. It became a foundation for healthier interaction. Respect replaced uncertainty. Understanding replaced silence. And emotional pressure slowly faded into a steady working relationship. Outside the set, life continued as normal. There were no public declarations, no dramatic announcements, and no attempts to turn the moment into something larger than it was. Instead, both actors returned their focus fully to their careers, carrying the experience as a personal lesson rather than a public story. Over time, What remained of the situation was not conflict or romance, but growth. Tan Songyun had learned the importance of expressing emotional limits clearly rather than silently enduring discomfort. Sukai had learned the weight of silence and the importance of addressing emotional distance before it grows too large. And between them, what once felt fragile had transformed into something more stable and respectful. As filming eventually wrapped, the final days on set carried a peaceful tone. There were no emotional outbursts or dramatic farewells. Just simple acknowledgments, polite smiles, and a shared understanding that a chapter had ended in a healthier place than where it once began. When the final scene was completed, the atmosphere was calm. Not heavy, not emotional, just complete. And as they walked away from the set in different directions, there was no lingering tension, no unresolved pain, and no unfinished emotion. Only the quiet reality that some stories do not end in chaos or collapse. Some end in understanding. And that is exactly what this became. A story that began with silence and misunderstanding, but ended with clarity, boundaries, and mutual respect. And for fans watching this fictional journey unfold, it left behind a lasting impression. Not of perfect love, but of emotional growth that felt real enough to remember.